now that you understand the overview of the 2017-18 budget, let's take a deeper dive into departmental spending and what those budgets look like going into next school year. Now, when we go through these, each cabinet member that is responsible for those departments will be presenting their area to go through the budget and talk about what they're spending their money on. Remember, for our departmental budgets, we used a zero-based budgeting process. So that means that we looked at every single dollar, compared it to previous year's spend, and tried to determine what we actually need for the students in front of us this year to make sure that we're supporting schools, kids, and keeping our organization running. So in order to do that, some of the things that we did is we removed departmental carryover. Departmental carryover was if a department had money left over at the end of the year, that money would carry to the next year. We are not doing that. If a department has money left over for whatever reason, that money is going back into the till to be used for schools and students. As you'll recall from the second video, there is a difference between school-managed dollars and centrally managed dollars. So as we go through this presentation, we will be talking about the centrally managed dollars. You will see some things categorized as non-discretionary. That simply means that we absolutely have to spend money in that area, perhaps because it's required by law, or perhaps it's to pay our energy bills so that we can keep the lights on. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my team to go through their departments one by one and give you context for each. Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll go through the school leadership budget here quickly. My budget is comprised of three separate areas: school leadership and the work that my team and I actually do with schools, the choice department, and then athletics and activities. So what you see here first, the two top lines, support and improvement of instruction. That is myself and my team. So you have 10 FTE there, myself, and the assistant that I used to have. Someone hired her away. If you guys find him, let me know. But we'll be replacing that position, as well as my 4 executive directors and their assistants. Those 4 directors each support between 14 and 18 schools. For comparison, I think we used to have 9 directors for each of the 9 feeders. I think Creek has 6 for about 2/3 of the schools, so I feel it's about as lean as we can get there. Operationally, we spend about $50,000, and that's for our own professional development, mileage, things like that within the department. You see $644,000 that is in our line item that actually goes out to the stipends that principals pay their building leadership teams. That's why you see it in the direct to schools column, as well as $200,000 for the Emergenetics license. We obviously get that at a cheaper cost if we negotiate in bulk, so we pay for that for the schools. And then you have $35,000 in miscellaneous school supports, and that's anything from supporting spelling bees to other work that we do in terms of suspension relief and things like that. And then $68,000 in non-departmental other. That's our rental of buildings, Hope and Pace, for principal meetings, things like that, as well as food. We put some money aside for food for grief when we might have a student death or something like that. So that's in that non-departmental other. The other large line item you see there, 2219, is our strategic planning grant. So that's $1.3 million that goes straight out to schools. Secondary school teachers get quite a bit more planning time in comparison to elementary schools. So we put that money straight into SBB in a formula to give elementary schools the ability to give their teachers additional planning time. So that's the actual school leadership department. Choice programming is split into a couple areas. The first section you see there is Cloverleaf. The $394,000, that is the cost of their 8.7 FTE. So that is all FTE that actually teaches their students. Below you see more of the administrative cost of that. So you have 2.6 FTE. 1.4 of that is at the department level with a program coordinator and 0.4 admin support, and 46,000 of that is actually in the school portion with a 0.6 principal and 0.6 assistant. 100,000 for building rental, and $170,000 for textbooks, and that department has about $60,000 in operational costs. Going down to non-Cloverleaf home education, that entire cost is just 2 support folks to support the non-Cloverleaf home education. You then have Tom McMillan in his department, supervision of charter schools. So you have the $208,000 there is for the 2.6 FTE, and they have $54,000 in total operational costs. Finally, you'll see at the bottom, special education for Hope Online, $1.9 million. About 1.6 of that goes directly out to people that work in the field, and another $336,000 goes to itinerant staff or central office staff. The last item that you see here, athletics and activities, you have, again, the top there is mainly FTE. You have $272,000 in department. About $250,000 of that is staff, and that includes not only our district athletic director and his assistant, but also bookkeeper that pays for the $4.6 million in Schedule A that goes out to coaches and sponsors. You'll see we have about 600 middle and high school athletic and activity programs supporting over about 25,000 students. So that pay comes into our athletics and activities account and then is paid back out. We also have $904,000 that comes in. $324,000 of that goes back out for transportation to events. $450,000 of that is that Panorama athletic trainer contract, and then another $130,000 goes to rental of pools and facilities that we do not have available in the district that we get to use for free. And then you see each of our 3 stadiums broken up into the staffing and operational costs for each of those individual stadiums. I will now hand it off to Dr. Cook to talk about the Deputy Superintendent Department.
Thank you, Ted. If you think of Ted's team, leadership team, as the primary circle that's directly supporting schools, the seven departments that I'm going to share with you now are one layer out that are direct support and indirect support to the schools in that regard. So there's 7 departments that fit under the supervision of the deputy superintendent budget line items, and that's the first one is curriculum and instruction and professional growth, which formerly was PD, certified PD, and world-class ed, and we've combined those and then cut much of that staff to get it much more sized right. The second one on this page is classified professional development, which we'll talk about, I think, later also. I'll mention that going into the 17-18 year is going to be moved under our HR wing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The important thing to note here is reduction in FTE in the first department in curriculum and instruction, and then likewise noting that how much of the overall budget goes directly into schools, goes into teachers' hands in the form of instructor pay or paying for overtime for classified staff to participate in mandatory trainings to do their jobs well, and or classified staff members who are also experts in their field to help train other staff members in areas of need across the district. And you can see that's been broken out here for a total of about $700,000 directly to schools and another $115,000 indirectly to schools in the form of stipends or overtime to our staff, for our teachers and our classified staff. Just a little shout out to this classified professional development, 275 job codes that they have to train for across the district. They did just this year, up until the May 1st, had trained 6,002 participants out of about 4,700 possible people. So obviously some people are getting trained more than once, but that's the number of trainings that we're getting for that dollar. I would challenge that that's a very good investment of our dollar with regards to that. They have right now, they've done classified mentors across 60 schools and 10 departments. That's a direct impact to about 3,100 staff, classified staff across the district. They also have done a leadership institute this year that met twice a month for 32 people that agreed to be a part of that cohort, and in developing ongoing sustainable leadership training for people in those departments. CIPG, this is one that has been maybe in the radar a little bit as professional development in the past. Just the professional development side of this, including world-class ed, those two departments had a combined budget of about almost $4.6 million in previous years. And last summer's event, if you recall, that we had about 570 people participate in this. We've already reduced that budget to about 2.5 going into the next year, and currently have 1,800 registrants signed up for 4 separate trainings this year. So we're in effect tripling just the summer work alone with about half the staff, just right at half the staff. So they're very proud of that work and are to be commended for sure. Going into next year, they've got 3 major initiatives that they're focusing on. All of these initiatives came directly from feedback from teachers and staff in the system. Learning labs are locations where teachers are going to receive stipends if they're willing to participate in this, where we can send other teachers to look at how something's being done. Learning cohorts, there are groups of people that would like to work together, teachers and PLS and admin teams that would like to connect and focus on a common area that they've determined through conversation, and we'll provide opportunity and access for them to do that. And then the last one is the Learning Academy. This is in a partnership with IT to provide basically on-demand professional development through either an online or blended model in which teachers can access, teachers and staff, not just teachers, but classified staff and also pro-tech staff can get training in areas that they want and they desire at their leisure, at their home, if they, for example, wanted to. The other departments are similar in this regard. Career Tech Ed, DLMC, Educator Effectiveness and Academic Integrity. They're all in direct support to schools. Career Tech Ed, if you recall, is Sherry Bryant did a presentation to you guys earlier in the fall. The money that you see here, that $1.25 million, that pays for students to enroll in concurrent enrollment classes in which they get dual credit, both college and high school credit. We are fully reimbursed for that expense from the colleges. Typically, that's ACC. That's also Colorado Christian, and we have a couple of other agreements, but ACC is the lion's share of that. The $218,596 you see below that, we pay out for every kid that's enrolled in a CTE credit. We give the school $5 just as a kind of an incentive for that, and that goes directly into the SBB. And then about about $150,000 of that is earmarked to pay for out-of-district placements for Career Tech Ed programs that students want. And we typically have more ask than we can afford with that. So that's an area that if we could expand, we absolutely would. There is demand there. And those are programs that we don't currently offer in the district that we would hope to someday if the opportunity were to arise. DLMC is our library services. I have some metrics to show you on that one. Educator Effectiveness is our the site and lead rubric work. The major point of this, $84,000, is our stipends that go out to pay for the people that are participating on the committee to make sure that we have teacher voice and leader voice in development of those rubrics so that they are helping design and make sure that those rubrics are meeting the needs of the staff. Academic integrity, you guys have gotten to know Eric Prouty very well just through his work. This is where his department is classified, and this is about, in essence, the fidelity of the transcript and graduation requirements and assuring that those things exist according to policy across the district, and that has been a definite benefit to the district in the last couple of years. This department did not exist, and Eric would be glad to tell you that when he first got here, there was plenty of work to do. Our library and media services, this is a very strong department, and we get a lot of support from the system, from the work that is being done through them. They're seeing much more activity, especially in ebooks that are being accessed. We have a lot of requests for database interest across the system. And because we have, and this is important to note, we have 48 neighborhood elementary schools. 41 of those 48 elementary schools do not have a certified librarian because it's a cost-effective measure in their eyes. And so they have what is known as a classified librarian, which is an option, but it's not necessarily the most it's cost-effective, let me put it that way. And so one of the things that we feel like is necessary with that model is that we've got to do a significant amount of training to help them provide the services that the schools need to deliver on those. Also, due to their hard work, almost about $120,000 of grants and completely donated books just through the hard work of this department. I do want to make sure that you're aware that CTE is also funded in other funds. Career Tech Ed, we get a Perkins grant, which is federal monies of almost $200,000. Almost all of that goes directly to schools to help purchase equipment and needs in the system so that those Career Tech Ed programs can exist. And also the CTE reimbursements fund that comes from the state. We use that to fund positions in buildings, or at least partially fund positions in buildings. And the 15-16 year, we funded 19.22 FTE across all of our high schools out of this funding. That's not obviously mathematically accurate. Those are partial fundings. Safety and security is the last department that is under my supervision, and you'll notice that's a pretty steep budget, but that's also, that's where we're paying for the school resource officers and the school marshal program. That also pays for our patrol members, and you'll notice that we have capital projects in there of $406,000. Every year we've tried to work with updating our equipment, our security equipment in buildings. Last year, the major initiative was to get the high school cameras up to date, and that was completed late summer, early fall last year, I think. And this year, our focus is to do the same thing, going from an analog camera at the middle schools up to an IP type camera at the middle schools, and our goal is to have those all done by October 1. We also have the dispatch center is funded out of this area, and you'll notice that's about a $500,000 spend for our dispatch center. Just want to share with you the amount of impact that center has. They take about an average of 14,000 calls a year. 1,223 tips were addressed last year. That's text-to-tips and safe-to-tell tips combined last year. And if you recall, every one of those tips has to be investigated in some fashion. This department monitors 1,400 cameras, 82 servers, 26 different systems across the district, and has to coordinate with 4 law enforcement departments, 4 law enforcement entities, and 6 fire departments across the county. 9 deputies that we have that are school resource officers, and 12 marshals. And all of that work gets coordinated through this dispatch center, and we work very diligently to make sure that that is as efficient as possible. All right, at this time, I would like to turn it over to Nancy Ingalls, your Chief Personalized Learning Officer.
Thank you. Good evening. In personalized learning, we have several teams and budgets that we've tried to collapse into 3 main areas. Some of our smaller budgets we have collapsed into this personalized learning slide. Then separately, we'll talk about preschool and then special education. So in personalized learning, there are 2 different types of costs. You can see in the columns, one is labeled department, and there's another one labeled direct to schools and students. And essentially, the numbers that are in the department column represent the costs of staff and operational costs associated with administering those programs. And then in the next column, direct to schools and students, those costs reflect staff who are providing services directly to students in schools, or materials that maybe go directly to schools for those programs. And so, for example, health services, student services, funds our nursing staff, CPR training, and then nursing coverage for base and for extended school years, extended school year programs. Another thing to note in personalized learning is that we do have some of the special revenue that Bonnie mentioned earlier that helps offset some of this. So in personalized learning, there may be some of these things that are partially funded through title, or maybe for gifted and talented, there's a little bit of state money that we get for that program. Additionally, we participate in the Medicaid reimbursement program that funds a lot of these positions and things that you see here. So there are some notes on the side, but essentially the programs here hopefully are explained in the notes. The program 2190, Other Support Services, that is our Healthy Schools programs, and they work 100% with schools. And then the 2865, Wellness, is actually our prevention and team up folks that work directly with schools. Following, we have Gifted and Talented, English as a Second Language, Reading Recovery, and then finally, this personalized learning includes myself and some other staff in the office, and there are some costs there that cover foreign language interpretation services for different meetings that happen in schools, as well as the tuition that we pay for students who might spend time throughout the year in the Foot Detention Center. This pays for a portion of our YES officers that work in our schools, our portion of the Douglas County Youth Initiative, and some audiology costs for hearing screens in schools. Just some other notes in health services. We know that those folks address the health needs of all of our students in schools. Another thing that I wanted to note is that these funds here are for department-housed staff and operations. In addition, there are many areas that have SBB allocations in schools. So for example, on health services, we have some FTE there that primarily for nursing, but in addition to that, schools have allocations in their SBB for part-time health assistants that we don't see here. Another couple of examples are all of our schools have an allocation for gifted and talented facilitators in schools. You don't see that here. Same with ESL teachers and reading recovery teachers. So our Medicaid reimbursement program is very important to us. It funds 26 and a half, I believe, positions that are health related. So that's extremely important. Our Healthy Schools and our Team Up serve schools directly, like I mentioned. Our last official count for identified gifted learners was over 5,000. And identified English learners was over 3,000. And in this last year, there were roughly 1,200 students served directly through Reading Recovery. And those folks also do a lot of coaching with staff for literacy intervention as well. And then finally, we do receive a total of $2.2 million in title funds. Next, we'll talk about preschool. We have roughly 2,000 preschool students that attend school in 71 different classrooms across our district. And so there are some department staff that have to administer the preschool program, and then the remainder of that cost is all of our preschool staff. We do collect preschool tuition that helps offset that cost. In addition, we can see revenue for Colorado Preschool Program and e-care, which can also help offset that cost. In special education, similar format where there are costs held in the department that are needed to administer those programs. And the remainder of the costs you can see are direct to schools. So these are going to be our staff who are working directly with kids in schools in all of these different areas. The line that you see at the bottom, 2231, the Supervision of Special Education Program, that's our Special Education Administrator Program. So those 15 FTE there that you see are our special education directors, coordinators, and the admin staff. We have significant state reporting requirements that require some administrative staff in order to complete. In terms of special education, we have 2 official count numbers in each school year with the state. One of them is called the end of year count, and the other one is called the December count. So the end of year count happens in June, and that is a count of all services or evaluations that were conducted in that school year. So last year, our end of count was over 9,000, which includes all students who had an evaluation whether they qualified or not, and all students who were serviced on an IEP, whether they were here the whole school year or not. And then our official count, the December count, is similar to the October count for PPR. It's a one-day count of active IEPs. So on our last December count, on that day, we had over 7,000 active IEPs. And this includes all of our students ages 3 through 21. So this would include our preschool special education students, as well as our 18 to 21 bridge program students. And then there is a large allocation to schools for special education staff, in addition to the itinerant staff that you see here, in order to provide all of the services for special education. So the SBB allocations are broken down into classified and licensed. Those classified staff are educational assistants, and that totals $49 million. And then finally, special education with early childhood. It's important to note that in our preschool programs, of that 2,000 students that I mentioned, roughly 850 of them are students on IEPs. Our preschool program is inclusionary, which means those 71 classrooms are roughly about half students on IEPs and half typical preschool students. We also have 4 child find teams that conduct evaluations for children birth through age 5. And so that is included in the cost here for early childhood special education. Okay, I will hand it over to Matt Reynolds for assessment.
Good evening. When we look at assessment, the assessment budget, there's a direct correlation between the assessment and data demands that the state puts on us and this budget. So as the state has increased the amount of assessment that we have and the data requirements, you'll see that's reflective in the budget. So if you start up at the top with the 12 FTE, just a point of reference, Ted used Cherry Creek. Cherry Creek has on their website 10 dedicated folks to this same work for roughly 40-50% more students. And I decided to divide my operational budget up. When you're talking about state assessments, there's the direct and indirect costs for administering state assessments. Some of the assessments are paid for by the state, and some of them aren't. There's READ Act assessments, which we're required to do. The state does not pick up that cost. And so that cost is actually embedded as part of my budget that I allocate out to schools, and we'll go through each one of those lines. So when you're administering a state assessment, you have to train people. So I have a line item for that. If I have to pull people out of class to be able to train them on state assessments, then I pay for that sub so that schools don't have to pay for that cost. We have stipends available for those folks that are implementing at the school level. Those folks put in a tremendous amount of work in implementing these assessments, including the day-to-day activities of actually administering it, also the lead up to those. So we provide them a stipend for that work. The next line is Site 6 stipends. This is work that we've been primarily doing the last couple of years with folks in personalized learning to help them with measures of student learning, according to SB 191, to pay those folks to help them create systems that really capture the data that's necessary to be reflective of their work. The next line, we have purchase services. This includes primarily Hanover research, which is something that folks across the district use as part of the research. They put in requests and we use that. Another big cost in that is TS Gold. That's something that we budgeted several months ago. We think that we'll be able to relay some savings there with Race to the Top funds. They still have some of those left. So when we put in our data for the number of students, we should get that money back from the state, but it's still included in the budget. Another large component of the budget is the testing supplies down here. This line item right here is a per pupil amount that I pay to schools based on their enrollment. That's to help offset the cost of assessments as they come through. The best example of that would be the READ Act assessments. Again, it's required by the state that we do a READ Act assessment. They don't pay for it. So rather than have the schools pay for it, we budget it in my budget, and we allocate that based on October count. The last thing that we have is this mailing cost. When they mail out test results rather than schools paying for it, that's something that we put in our budget and pay for that on their behalf. So a couple of things regarding the implementation of these assessments. My department, we work on 15 assessments across 87 schools with 4 different READ Act assessments. Typically, districts only have 1, but we have 4 due to the choices that buildings have. We process over 450,000 student records per year. We anticipate that number going up next year with the inclusion of TS Gold, which is now going to be a requirement for next year. That's going to increase that number, as well as graduation competencies. As those graduation competencies come in, we're going to have to process that data to make it available to be on transcripts. We also are involved in measures of student learning for teachers. We help gather that information. We provide unified improvement planning support for all the schools. A new thing that's been relatively new over the last couple of years is parent excusals. That's something that we process in my department. These only include the ones that are captured online. There's obviously ones that people don't use the online system for. We're involved in special projects. The 2 that you're probably most familiar with, I listed up there. But we're also pulled into other department conversations when it comes to research projects. And the last thing that we do is we review and approve research applications, both internal and, more importantly, the external research applications. So if someone comes through, they want to do a survey of our kids, we work with those, either a vendor or a researcher, to make sure that they're following data privacy rules and that we're getting a benefit of that research process. Internal applicants, it's something that we provide as a service for those people who are getting their PhD or master's. We help them with gathering the data and help them coordinate their research projects as part of that process. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Coelho and Human Resources.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Education, good evening. It's a pleasure to speak with you tonight. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Office of Human Resources. Our goal, once I can get the clicker to work, our goal is to partner with all of our employee groups to help facilitate a positive and productive culture and climate. We are uniquely situated to do that because on a daily basis, we touch hundreds, sometimes thousands of our employees through various HR processes. There is very little in our budget that doesn't touch employees, again, on sometimes hundreds, thousands on a daily basis. You'll see 3 general categories up here. The meat of it lives really in that middle item, staff services, which I've broken out into 2 items there. We are no different than any other HR department in that we are very much support and service oriented. We are very people intensive. We need and we have very good people doing that work. So quickly, the first line item actually deals with 191 displacements. You've heard that in a couple of other presentations. If you look at the total FTE 0.3, that's a really good low number. That means that we had no displacements for this school year. I will tell you for the upcoming school year, we anticipate this number perhaps being a little bit higher. We hope not. But to the extent that we do have some displacements, we are hopeful that we can help those teachers find mutual consent positions during the school year. I'll also draw your attention to the third line item, building improvement services. That's actually our ADA compliance line item. We spend roughly $180,000 in Americans with Disabilities Act compliance. So to the extent that we have employees with disabilities, we have about $180,000 to work with their work desk, workstation, computer items, that sort of thing to help accommodate per the Americans with Disabilities Act. Staff services, let's get to that. We have 28 total FTE in HR. That's myself, 14 and a half employee relations directors and staff, and 13 and a half operations directors and staff. I've got subsequent slides that will help put into context the value that those 28 folks bring to the district. The second line item there, the sub-item, is an operations line item, roughly $140,000 for things like background checks, recruiting costs, mileage reimbursement, among other things, really the nuts and bolts of the employment process in the district. I'd like to give you some context for the 28 FTE, and in order to do that, I've given you a couple of studies there. The first one is a 2015-16 Bloomberg study that sets out that for large organizations, as defined 2,500 or more employees, an average ratio of 0.6 HR FTE per 100 employees served was what they found. Bloomberg actually got about 315 employer responses, and that's the basis of that number. Similarly, SHRM, a very prominent HR organization in 2015, published a study. Large organizations, they define it as 1,001 employees or more, an average ratio of 1.03 HR FTE per employees served. Douglas County School District for this past school year, 0.38 HR FTE per 100 employees served. That's 28 FTE for approximately 7,400 employees, or put another way, 1 HR employee for every 264 district employees. So by those two metrics, we actually are fairly lean. And if I may get into a question that may be on some of your minds, how do we compare to other school districts in this regard? I'll tell you, particularly in an HR perspective, that comparison can be very, very tricky. School districts staff their HR departments based on their peculiarities, their particular and unique cultures, circumstances, what have you. We are no different. I can tell you that based on what I am aware of and what I know, all of our school districts, Douglas County included, fare very well in light of those metrics. And I will tell you that none of us, or that we all are fairly close, and that Douglas County actually fares pretty well in the comparison district to district. But overall, we all do okay per those metrics. You have there the HR non-discretionary budget. I'm happy to take questions about anything in there tonight or at our subsequent meeting. So for purposes of moving forward as quickly as we can, I'll just leave that there and again offer up answering any questions you may have. Let me just give you very quickly an activity snapshot for school year 16-17. And again, I divided up for ease of reference HR into two separate entities there, the operations side of the house and the employee relations side of the house. The operations side of the house comprises our staffing and our HRIS folks. Here's what we experienced over the last school year. 21,000 calls to our HR Solutions Center. 8,000 give or take staffing actions to include hire and separation, internal transfers, additions to reduction of employment duties, among other things, and substitution transactions. 16 formal recruiting events, many more informal efforts, and let me just give you a quick story on that. When I first got this position about 2 months ago through social media, I received a couple of inquiries about jobs in the district. I immediately forwarded those inquiries to our staffing director and our assistant, and they took care of those. So that recruiting effort is ongoing, whether formal or informal. And then a steady flow of systems processing on a daily basis and data collection on a constant basis. On the employee relations side, employee relations directors and staff, compensation and benefits. We worked through 600 significant employee matters this year. And by significant, we mean an employee matter that is beyond a single call or a single email. Those included discipline, SB 191 matters, among a variety of others. We managed benefits for 4,800 employees, medical, dental, vision, among others. We facilitated 500 employee leaves, FMLA, military, general, what have you. And we handle thousands of compensation-related process and communications. We're busy on a daily basis. Again, our goal is to help facilitate a positive climate and culture. Part of that is developing really good, healthy, reasonable processes And we do that like all other school district HR departments within the context of some unique circumstances. One of them is the Teacher Employment Compensation Dismissal Act, TECTA, commonly known. That dictates, particularly for our teachers' probationary and non-probationary status, among a variety of other terms and conditions of employment. We are unique. School districts are unique in that respect. We had changes to TECTA, not so recent, I suppose, in 2010, evaluation, displacement, portability, among others. HR departments are challenged across the state because we have the language of the statute which says something, and everybody tries to adhere to the language of the statute. We don't have a lot of case law, though, interpreting the statutes. So again, we are all in a position to do the best we can to navigate the relatively new law and try to get at its intent and its letter. We have licensing, credentialing requirement issues, and we have employee pool shortages. So on balance, in the aggregate, again, we are especially challenged as HR departments really across the state, and we really do the best we can. And again, we've got some great people in HR here doing some great work. Thank you. I just want to introduce Gautam Sethi.
My apologies in advance. I'm going to go through this real fast, and obviously here to answer any questions you may have. I got 12 slides. When we think of the IT budget, we think of $18 million IT budget. I want to be clear about the fact that it's actually two different buckets in the IT budget. One budget is our operational budget, which, as every other department has resources in it, FTE budget, and then the operation dollars. Here's a breakdown of the FTE currently in the IT department. This is the entire IT department, kind of gives you a layout of the different kind of resources we have. 92% of this budget is in direct and salary and benefits. Only 8% of this budget is in operational needs, and that generally is equal to mileage reimbursement, staffing needs, professional development needs, travel and training, and things of those nature. The other big bucket, which you see, which adds up to the $18 million number, is a non-discretionary budget. These numbers are essentially all the money we spend in the IT organization supporting everything the district needs to run and operate its technology infrastructure. So that could be hardware, that could be software. The one big number is included in here is our rotation dollars. Every year over year, we replace computers in the classrooms, and that is allocated $3.2 million towards that. Our staff rotation also has district allocation, and then our network switches and everything else has district allocation. Rest of it is software licensing, and I'll talk about it in a minute. To give you a sense of the metrics, IT department currently has 56 people who are supporting a pretty large and complex infrastructure. We have 50,000 devices in the district, 7,000 phones just in the district alone, 3,800 wireless access points, which we know work 99% of the time, but that 1% of the time they don't work, it hurts. 110,000, 5.6 million emails monthly. That's the kind of infrastructure we are operating here. And I would almost guess that we can't find another private organization with 56 people running anything close to this infrastructure. The district technology purchases in the non-discretionary number, which kind of talks about everything we buy for the entire district. I've listed some of the top line items in there. Obviously, we have details for you to if you like, and we can share them at any point in time. Mostly business systems, and this is just some of them, not all of them. Workday is a $1.2 million annual contract. Kronos is a timekeeping system. ASOP is a substitute management system. Now, people can ask, why do we need all these systems? Well, if we don't, we can't manage a 7,000 people organization. We need efficiencies to run 7,000 people organization. For that, we need systems. Infinite Campus is a $490,000 annual budget in just annual renewals and so on and so forth. Inspired, quick overview of it because you see a request for $500,000 for continued support on Inspired. Inspired over the last few years has kind of become the system we have in the district right now for evaluations and elementary progress report cards, professional development system. That system has kind of completed. These are some of the metrics from here. Our total end of the year evaluations and middle of the year evaluations are about 24,000, 1,500 courses. Total EPIs released to parents, 90,000, and this is our second year releasing the EPIs to parent. Granted, we had a rough first year, but the second year has been much smoother. The operations budget, the other large bucket which you spend on in running and building and maintaining and operations. It's broken down into 4 different departments. There's the operations, planning and construction, and transportation. This is the budget for operations and maintenance. Again, large chunk of it is resources. As you can see, we have about 135 resources in this department in its entirety. And other money is spent across the district in supporting things like grounds, contracted services, repairing things, boilers, chillers, whatever breaks down, and preventative maintenance. I mean, things continue to work because we continue to try and do some preventative maintenance on those infrastructure. Non-discretionary, same thing as IT. There's the money which we can manage and control, and there's money we have to spend. We have to have electricity, natural gas, propane, all those other things. So that is a non-discretionary number for our O&M. For planning and construction, there's two things which generally happen, not a whole lot. We do mobile moves every year. Depending on where our students are moving, we'll move the mobiles over from one school to the other, and that is budgeted centrally. If the school is growing because of student need, we will move that money over and support them. The rental of lands and buildings is something we do right now for Child Find North and the bridge programs, and that will go away when Steady Lane building becomes operational, but we have budgeted for the full year because Steady Lane is right now scheduled to be operational during a fall break. And we have a lease which we have a commitment to, so we'll see how we manage that money. Operations and maintenance department, some high-level numbers just to kind of give you a sense. 6.5 million square feet, managed and maintained, 68 schools, 18 support sites, 139. When you look at all these numbers, it's staggering what 130 people who are dedicated to their trade and profession, which we have in our operations team, can do. Last year alone, they managed about 30,000 tickets across the entire district, which could be anything from custodial work to fixing an electrical issue or adding something into the building. Sustainability department, you guys met them today. They have been doing a tremendous job of improving our sustainability footprint and also reducing our cost across electricity and natural gas consumption, and also engaging students, which is kind of unique. When the operations team engage students, love them for that work. Transportation, the other big numbers here. Transportation is obviously all the resources we have had, and we have come to you, and thankfully you have accepted our propositions on improving salaries for our drivers and TEAs, which helps us be competitive in the market space. But we need all these resources to run our transportation department. The headcounts are here, the budget is there, and I'll go into some details in the next slide, and that is my last slide, on how many resources we have. We generally transport 11,000 students for general education. Our general education routes are not growing, but we have tremendous pressure from our special education routes, which continue to grow, which we have to serve because they are a mandated service. We have 3 terminals across our entire district. Our 400 staff members are deployed by the transportation, including the bus drivers, transportation assistants. Over the course of the year, we drive about 4 million miles. That's kind of an interesting number to see. We collectively drive about 4 million miles annually throughout the district transporting our kids. That's a huge number, and we have a metric report which was just recently released, and I'll be happy to share that, which kind of compares us to some other districts on the Front Range. And on the flip side of it, our buses, since we never buy new buses or haven't in the past, they're all 15 years old at an average age and at 239,000 miles on the odometer. So kudos to the transportation team for keeping us operational and safe. Business services.
So business services, the two things I'd like to say globally about business services are first, we have been working tirelessly, the entire business services team, on implementing Workday this year. We are on target to go live July 1st. And we have our bookkeepers and our administrative assistants out at all of our schools actually excited about the prospect of only having to interface with one ERP system. So we're looking forward to that, and we will be presenting a update to you probably in July or August on how that went. In addition, this is just globally business services. We do also oversee the building, the West Support Center. As you know, many of our meetings are held at the West Support Center. We maintain all of the coffee supplies and paper, et cetera, for that as well. And then these are all of the FTE counts by particular area of business services. A couple of things I'd like to point out in our warehouse and district distribution services. We did begin a program about 2 years ago to hire one of our bridge students. So we have a bridge student working in there. He's graduated through the bridge program, and he's half-time, and he provides support in there. We'd like to keep him for another year. He's actually entering into his second year, and he's doing a great job. We'd like to continue that program. Again, it's really a nice step into the real world after our bridge students are leaving their bridge program. In addition, I wanted to point out we began a process of a program called Train the Trainers, in which we are encouraging a handful of our timekeepers throughout the school district to come with us in payroll to be able to provide training for all of their other fellow timekeepers to ensure that we're getting the data correctly into our payroll system so that we pay people accurately over and over again. Our non-discretionary items, these are all of our online payment transaction fees. We do not charge our parents for any of the fees that they transmit to us through RevTrack. We have banking service fees, and in addition, treasurer fees. These are the fees that are charged by the county to collect our property taxes on our behalf. This is budget and student data and information services. And I wanted to mention again, all these budget staff have been actively participating in our Workday implementation at the same time doing all of this work that you've seen tonight. So I wanted to thank them very much for that. In addition, student data works very closely with Matt in getting all that student data enrollment and our student counts, of course, in there, which, of course, as Aaron said earlier, is the basis for our funding. Payroll and keeping, these are just metrics. I won't go through these again. As Steve mentioned, 7,400 employees that we pay monthly. We do have one metric here, one payroll processor for every about 250 employees. We are operating one processor for about 925 employees. So we feel like we're being very efficient. Accounting and general ledger, I'm not going to go through all of this, but again, we have one grants accountant who supports all of the work that Nancy Ingalls does for over 30 separate grants and about $13 million. Strategic sourcing and warehouse, I talked a little bit about that. These metrics are there for you to review. And then finally, facility use also resides under the Business Services Department. This department exists solely to facilitate the rental of all of our facilities. Again, there's a cost that are in all of these. These are rental program expenses. You can see the total revenue, $1.5 million in 2015, a little bit less in 2016. But all of these expenses are rolled into that with a net income of $1.1 million. We share 25% directly to our schools that earn it. And in addition, the rest of that money is been designated for athletic venues. So our turfs, our fields throughout the school district. And none of the money stays within business services. It's all allocated out. Again, this is just some examples of where that money went in the 2015-16 school year. And then finally, I want to hand this over to Erin Kane to present about our communications budget.
I'm going to go over the communications budget for you. So Douglas County School District has a central communications department, and the total budget for that department is about $780,000. What does that department do? What do we get for that money? Our communications department, first and foremost, supports our schools with everything from training on social media, as well as training on websites and all of those things that our schools need to function. Our communications department also does district-wide social media, along with our internal and external newsletters. Remember, Douglas County School District is an organization that employs over 8,000 people, and we need to be able to build relationships with those people and be communicating with those people so that they understand what's going on in their organization. They also handle relationships with our community and our parents, which is very important. Finally, I want to mention media relations. So having 89 schools, as you can imagine, we interact with the media on a regular basis. And our communications department helps us with those interactions to make sure that we're able to get information out to the public in a timely manner and that we're as transparent as possible with that information. This slide also gives you an overview of what kinds of things the communications department does. We have made cuts in the communications department along with most of our other departments in terms of reducing positions as well as advertising. So we are not advertising our school district in movie theaters, etc. We do, however, advertise when we need bus drivers or other kinds of personnel. Lastly, we've provided a comparison to local other school districts and what their communications departments look like. Finally, we have part of our communications, but a separate budget is school and community partnerships. Now, this is a requirement by state law that we have a parent liaison that engages our community. So that's what this budget is for to compliance for that state law and for working with our parents and community, particularly around our school accountability committees and our district accountability committee.
And Will is last, and then I will come back to wrap it all up.
Hello, thank you, directors. My name is William Trackman. I'm the general counsel of the school district. I have 2 quick slides, and while I like to think that lawyers do add a lot of value in the world, the role of an in-house legal department is generally to mitigate loss and to avoid damages. So let's talk about the 2 quick slides I have. The first one is the 2 departments that I oversee. The first is legal and the second is risk. You'll see the legal services at the top, which has 3 FTEs, including myself. And that's all in terms of my salary, my admin salary, our records custodian salary, our outside legal fees, our damages awards, our settlements. That number is lower than it otherwise would have been because I plan to bring more work in-house next year and avoid some of the outside legal expenses that we've had in past years. Second, you'll see the risk management categories. That first one involves things like water pipe breaking or vandalism, and that number is a little bit lower than last year, although frankly, most of these categories are ones that we don't have a lot of control over. We get lucky sometimes, and so all of these are lower than last year, although there was already not much fat to trim. The second is risk management services, which involves things like inspections and trainings and things that prevent other losses. The third is liability insurance, which generally involves student injuries or student accidents, again, a little bit lower than last year. And the last category is building improvement services, which has to do with proactively preventing dangerous conditions or other things that might lead to bigger losses down the road. So why do we need to spend the money that we do? Well, one reason under legal is that the district is under siege in terms of KORA requests. So we receive a KORA request an average of every day and twice on Sundays, 525 to date this year. We estimate about 573 by the end of this month. FERPA requests, common tactic by plaintiffs' lawyers is to ask for every document referencing a student. And so that ends up costing us a great deal of staff time. When I was in private practice, I would advise my clients that they can expect 1 lawsuit for every 200 employees. We have been getting very lucky. We only have about 7 employment lawsuits open on the books right now. So again, that's one category where we're very fortunate that things aren't worse than they are. And then, not to pick on our friends Cherry Creek, but their budget request for next year, and they have significantly more lawyers and FTEs is 1.18 million. So we're lower than them. You can see the risk management metrics there in terms of our property and liability, like the water pipes breaking or the vandalism. We've got 244 claims that we're processing. Property damage, 300 claims, and then background checks, which is part of our risk management services. We do about 600 a year. So we are making good use of that money, and we are getting a little bit leaner next year, and I'm happy to answer any further questions, and I'll turn it over to Interim Superintendent Kane.
Thank you to my team for giving everyone an overview of the budgets in their individual departments. The last budgets remaining include a few miscellaneous things, including a budget for the Board of Education, which includes any work they may need to do around a potential future bond mill levy override or other initiatives that they may have. There's a budget for the superintendent's office that includes what we need to do in order to be able to run the district here, and then miscellaneous supplies for our central buildings. Finally, the last budget is the Douglas County Education Foundation. And they've rebranded. They're now the Foundation for Douglas County Schools. And they are doing everything they can to become self-sustaining so that they aren't using district funds in order to run. And so that's a progression that will happen over the series of a couple of years. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful to see how all of our departments were funded. As always, if you want more information or if you have any questions, please look on our website under Financial Transparency, and you're always welcome to reach out to someone in my office to get your questions answered. Thank you so much for your time, and again, thank you for your partnership and your dedication to our kids. Together, I'm absolutely convinced that we can move this district forward and do the best thing for our kids.